So I created an event called Card Party. It launched in 2023. We just held our third annual event in Tampa Bay, Florida. $0 spent on marketing. We sold out 5,500 people at the Tampa Bay Convention Center. 800 vendor tables, all sold out. $0 spent on marketing, all word of mouth. And there were at least 200 to 300 people who were the ones that pre-ordered my book, who were, again, at this event. So they're spending money with me in all different kinds of ways up the Ascension ladder, and who wanted me to sign their book in person with them at the event, which was really cool.
Hey, Launch family, before today's episode, I have a small favor to ask you. We realize not everyone who's watching our show is subscribed to the channel. So if you've ever learned anything valuable from our conversations, or if you felt inspired by one of our guests, can you do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button? It helps grow the show more than you know. And the bigger the show gets, the bigger our guests will get. Thank you. And here's today's Dare to Launch. Hello, Launch family. This is Dare to Launch. My name is Chris. And as always, I'm joined by our co-host, Mr. Jeff Walker.
Hey, folks.
And my other co-host, Mr. Dan Walker.
Hey.
And today we have a very special guest. He is the creator of the Smart Passive Income podcast, which is approaching, I think, 900 episodes very soon. He's one of the leading experts in the world of podcasting, and he's launched a ton of successful businesses, including information products, the Switch Pod, which is like a physical camera rig for creators, an app called Fusebox.fm for podcasts, a Pokémon YouTube channel with millions of subscribers, and also you've launched many successful books. His latest, called Lean Learning, How to Achieve More by Learning Less, just hit New York Times bestseller. Pat Flynn, welcome to Dare to Launch.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on and for that beautiful intro. It's one of the first times I'm hearing the New York Times tag in an intro because it's so fresh. So it's just still trippy to me to hear. So thank you so much for the for the warm welcome.
It's awesome to have you. I've been watching your stuff for years and years, and I know you and Jeff go way back. Actually, Jeff, I don't know if you want to talk about how you know Pat, but
I was thinking about that coming in, and Pat, maybe you remember, but I don't remember. It's just like it feels like I've known you for a decade or more, and I don't even know where we met.
We have a lot of mutual friends for sure. More recently, I had both you and Dan on the podcast talking about the sort of father-son relationship in business. That was really fun, and I appreciate that. But going way back to when we first met, I believe it was through Michael Hyatt and the work for Best Year Ever. And I think that we were sharing a few moments together at Blackberry Farm. I believe that's where we met.
Okay.
And that was, again, a long time ago. Because we've been in this space for a while. I mean, from PLF formula and stuff. I mean, you were doing it before I was, but I was taking inspiration from you when I started in 2008. And that's when I got my first foray into online business after getting laid off from an architecture job that I loved. I actually really loved the architecture world. And I got forced out of it in the Great Recession, started my own business, met so many amazing people and caught wind of the work that you guys were teaching. And I've used a lot of your work to help me become successful. So even before we get started with like book stuff, just thank you on behalf of my family and myself on what you've done to help me in my life and help me achieve more goals. It's really cool that I can come on the show and say that here to you now.
Well, thank you, Pat. And you're very welcome. And it's been fun just watching you. Your podcast is what I've seen the most of. And I just love what you brought to that. How long has it been now for that podcast?
July 2010. So it has literally been 15 years, almost to the date, actually. That being said, I had bought equipment 8 months prior to that and was so chicken to get started that I probably could have had, another 8 months on top of that if it weren't for all those fears. But finally got it started. It has led to so many opportunities, not just building an audience and building a multi-million-dollar business, but the friendships and the connections made with people who have had on the show and whose shows I've been on, to getting to know people in Hollywood who listen to the podcast and, writing my own short films and so many other randomness that happens with a podcast. Podcasting to me is still pretty new. I mean, there's generally speaking, numbers wise, there's still far less podcasts than there are YouTube channels and blogs, of course. So I still think we're in the early days. So hopefully this encourages people to maybe get behind the mic like you guys do and kind of follow suit.
Yeah. One of the things I love about your podcast, it feels like it just brought a breath of fresh air to this market, however you want to call this, the online entrepreneurship market, whatever, but just how the way you were so open about your entire business, about your cash flow, about how it all worked, I thought just brought an incredible breath of fresh air all those years ago. And
Thank you.
I think really steered the market in a significant way.
I think so. I saw a number of people afterwards start to be a little bit more open about their business and what was happening behind the scenes, including how much revenue was being made and or lost. I don't want to say I'm the first person to do it, but I'm definitely the first to do that and put it on the map. There were some people who were in the affiliate marketing space that did something similar. John Chow, if you remember that name from a long time ago, he was one. But I actually got my inspiration from before I got laid off. There was I was very much into the personal finance space. I was like subscribed to 50 different bloggers back when you would read blogs with an RSS feed reader. One of those blogs was called mymoneyblog.com. And there was a guy on there. He didn't share his name or anything, but he shared his exact investments in the stock market, how much he was putting in on what stock tickers. And that was like, he was like the only person to really open up about that. It made me trust him more. It made me want to learn more from him. So when I started my own business and then wanted to share how I built that architecture business, I was like, you know what, I'm going to be just as open because that's what made me connect with this person the most. And I want to connect with my audience the most as well. And sometimes the numbers weren't favorable, but there was always still a lesson to go along with that, which then just helped build more trust in the space and pretty quickly launched me into the sort of world that you guys were in, but just in a different way with my own spin on it.
Super cool. So, dude, how does it feel to hit that number one?
Not number one yet. I do have dreams to get there, but like nothing really has changed yet. I mean, it's still kind of new, but some people were like, so what has happened? Did you get calls from Oprah or any? I'm like, no, nothing has changed really. The only change is when I get introduced on podcasts now, I get that mark on it, which is pretty cool. And just, I had some time after the book launch to sit and relax, which I don't usually have. It's summer here when we're recording this. So actually the timing worked out where after the book launch, I had some time to just kind of reflect. And I was able to get very, very internal with what I had accomplished. Because usually I'm already moving on to the next thing. That's how a lot of us entrepreneurs are. We're like already planning the next thing. For me, I had some time to sit, be with my family, really celebrate with them and be proud of the work that I did. And this is my first traditionally published book. And so it was much, much slower of a process. There were a lot of things I had to let go of. And it was painful in some ways, but also, I'm just very grateful to where it ended up. And just, again, nothing has really changed yet, but I'm not slowing down. I know that, as long as I keep sharing the message and the book has a really good topic that is very relevant to the world right now, this idea of information overload and learning too much and getting over-inspired. And I also know just from some of our colleagues that this is the time to press on the gas even harder, not slow down. And that's where a lot of authors I found, even my own books in the past, I've made mistakes. Launch day was like the end, but it's more like a graduation. It's a commencement. It's the start of something. And so hopefully this is the start of something big. And, a lot of people are like, what's your big master plan here, Pat? You have this book. Are you starting like a learning agency? Are you going to start like all these big things in a multi-million-dollar company? And I was like, no, I just was really compelled to write this because I think it's so important right now. I wrote it for my kids. I wrote it for my students. I wrote it for the world. And I just think the message just needs to get out there. So yeah, nothing has changed. And, I hope there's going to be some good change that happens, mostly in terms of being an agent of change in this world that we live in today, in education, in entrepreneurship, in learning, and just, happiness overall. I think a lot of us are just, although we have access to all the resources we could ever want about learning anything, we often feel further behind. We often feel like we're missing something, even though everything is there. So we now have to learn how to navigate this new world, and with where AI is headed, and just the commoditization of information now. It's not about having access to the information anymore. It's about how you apply it and what you do with it and how you learn from the mistakes that you make when you take action.
I had the same experience with hitting the Times list. Is like absolutely nothing changed. No one called. I had this fear that because I live out in the mountains here in Durango, and pretty much no one here knows what I do, and I had this fear all of a sudden I'd be uncovered here. The local newspaper would call me up and want to do a feature, and even that didn't happen. And so none of that happened. But I love, that this is just the start of the journey for this book. It is such a topic. You can see I've got a few books here, but like that's just I'm glad the camera doesn't catch the rest of my office, because there are literally piles of books everywhere, more books than I'll ever be able to read in a lifetime. I love learning, but yeah, that idea of lean learning is just so critical right now, because the amount of the deluge of information coming at all of us is just.
Yeah. I mean, it's a ton. And I know you guys teach this to your students, like Dan, for you and the people that you guys teach and help in your audience, how do you help keep them on track with the things that you are teaching them versus, wanting to learn from other people? Like, how do you hold those people accountable to the work that they commit to do through you?
Dude, totally. It's such a thing because you can't go online right now. You can't open up Instagram without seeing, 10 different people telling you like the best way to get started or the best way to do something or something cool. And the problem is like, it's not actually a problem of like, of sorting through the good stuff and the bad stuff. Like there's a lot of good stuff out there. The problem could be that there could be 5 different ways that pop up on your feed in one day about how to grow your business. And they could all be good. And they could all be legit. But the problem is like if you're scattered, and if you jump from one to the other, like you're not going to end up going anywhere, right? So we really try to focus on just like, hey, you're on a path. It's a proven path. It's a good path, and stay on the path. And then, once you're bring in little sprinkles here and there, but you're going to get so much better results by just sticking and mastering one thing versus trying to, jump all over the place and add all kinds of stuff in there.
Yeah, we're not set up to succeed in the world we're in, right? When you're on your apps, for example, and you start investigating a few things to learn, which is important, you start getting fed everything about it. And, these people who are showing up on your feed are really good. They have the right hooks. They tell you all these things and they make everything they say very attractive, but it can sometimes be conflicting with the last video that you just watched. So it's like, how do you even know who to believe and who to watch or who to learn from? And this is why it's important. A big part of the book is finding like the right resources to learn from at the right time. It's the difference between just in case information, which is what we've all been doing. We treat information like it's a scarce food source, right? Like back in caveman days, if you came across like food, you hoard it because you might not find food again for a while. And we are treating information in the same way, even though we have access to all of it. And right now we're at this buffet line and we're stuffing our plates full of all this info. But not only that, per what you just said, we're also getting just force-fed stuff that we don't even know if we need or not. It's just so much. So that's just in case information. What we do, it's the people who subscribe to 50 different podcasts or read 50 different blogs about personal finance. This is just in case, and it feels good. It's almost like a fake moment of progress to have access to all the information because it feels safe, right? But what we need is just in time information. We need to know what it is that we're doing, what's the next step, and what it is that we're doing. Then find a resource to help us learn that next step, just one, and then implement, and then iterate from there. And when you need the next step, just trust that those resources will be there when you need it. This is actually how I started out in business, was through this process. I had built a website to help architects pass an exam. It's called the LEED exam, and there wasn't a ton of information about it. But I heard that I could write this ebook and sell a study guide to this audience, but I had never done that before. So, my first inclination, just because of how I was taught, was to go to business school. And it was like, okay, well, that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. I don't have the time. I'm living with my parents because I got laid off, and I'm needing the money now. So I can't go through that more traditional role, but maybe there's a way I can learn my way into this. So I was like, okay, well, let me learn all about what it takes to publish an ebook. And I started to get overwhelmed. There was just so much information, even in 2008, let alone now. So I said, okay, I just need to, like, no matter what, I know I need to get something in like written down. I'll figure out the rest later. So I just opened up Microsoft Word and got all my notes and took everything and just compiled it into the 74-page document. That was ugly, but it was all the information that needed to be there. Cool. Now I need to know how to format it to make it look good. Well, I just went on YouTube and found how to turn a more vertical presentation on Word into a more horizontal one with 2 columns with like places to work and blank spots to write in. I was like, okay, cool. That took an hour and a half. I didn't need that information in the beginning before I wrote the book, but I needed it then, and I found it. And then I needed to know how to sell this thing online, which I had never done before. So what did I do? I went to a person who had sold digital goods online before, and I just said, hey, what tool are you using to do that? and they introduced me to a tool called eJunkie, which no longer exists, but it allowed me to pop in my PDF file, get a button to put on my website, and I did that in like 20 minutes. I was like, great, I have this button now on my website, but I need to write sales copy. I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. So again, first inclination, I need to like go to copywriting school. I need to become a writer. No. If this were easy, what would it look like? That's the question you should always ask yourself. And I found out that there was a book by a man named Yannick Silver called Moonlighting on the Internet. And in the back of this book, I mean, the book was like 200 pages long about how to make money in all different kinds of ways on the internet, eBay or what have you. But in the back of the book, there was a Mad Lib style template for a sales page where you could just plug in your product, plug in your features, and plug in your benefits, and that's it. That sales page still works today. Now, 17 years later, and together with my website has generated over 7 figures. And this website I don't put any time into because it's just what it needs to be to help people. And so I'm able to make millions of dollars passively, not by learning all the things and then kind of getting overwhelmed, but by finding the information I needed at the time that I needed it. And again, we always try to overcomplicate things. It doesn't have to be that hard. Nothing in this book is revolutionary, by the way. It's almost, in a way, going back to how things used to be, right? Like when you learned how to become a blacksmith, you didn't like study being a blacksmith for 4 years in school and then finally get into the field. You like literally on day one burn your hands because you're too close to the forge, and you realize, oh, I need to be a little bit further away. You're already learning something from a master who's now teaching their apprentice. And like, if only school was like that again, or you know, I bet there's a vision of schools in the future where there is a mix of, you know, the basic foundational knowledge with real-time application for trades and things like that.
I love it. And yeah, it's great. I mean, that's, you know, one phrase that we keep reiterating to our students over and over is that done is better than perfect. It's, you know, it's just take the next step and get it done. So you got a phrase, I think it's from chapter 1 of the book, talk about inspiration overload. And that was something that just really started popping up for me there when you were talking, because I think it's so easy. It feels so easy, like when you're seeing all these different people and they're talking about the different ways, you know, like it's easy to get inspired by one person. They got the hooks, right? And then you get inspired by the next person, and then you get inspired by the next person. And suddenly I could see how it just would start to feel like you're behind if you're not getting as good as you can at every little thing. Like there, if you're writing the book, like you're going to stumble across someone who talks about how important it is to have a great cover. And then you're going to, you know, it's so easy to sell yourself on that thought of like, oh my gosh, I see why a great cover is so important. I need to focus on that. And then, you know, then someone else talks about how important your exercises are, your charts are. And it's like, oh man, I have to get that so good. And can you just talk a little bit about that inspiration overload?
Yeah, I mean, that's a term I came up with because we always hear about information overload, and that's kind of very obvious. But, you know, at the same time, inspiration is always seen as something good. It's always good to be inspired, you think. However, when you are getting inspired by all kinds of different people in all kinds of different places doing all kinds of different things, you're, like you said, going to feel left behind, or you're going to get pushed and pulled to do all different kinds of things all at the same time. And so we have to really control what enters our brain space and where we then put our energy. And so in the book, I create something called the inspiration matrix, which allows us to almost classify different things that we're focused on or interested in into different buckets. You know, there's the recreational bucket, which is more of the hobby-based thing, which are things that are maybe less important overall, but still exciting. And it's important to have something in that bucket. When I interview and I go through this audit process with this inspiration matrix with entrepreneurs especially, oftentimes this quadrant is empty, because all extra time is put into the passion pursuit where they're hustling and they're working on their career and something. And that's great. But if you don't have something recreational to escape to have breathing room in, you're just going to get burnt out. So having something in there, for me right now, it's fishing, and I go fishing every single week. That's my escape from all the crazy busy work and devices. I can get back into nature, and then I come back into Mondays really excited about going back into the thing in the passions that I have. The other part of this is the things that initially seem exciting. This is the inspiration overload part of it, but ultimately are just bad for you. This is like junk food. It's what I call junk sparks. And these are the things that ultimately will take so much time away from you and the commitments that you've already made that you're just going to go nowhere. If you run this audit that I talk about in the book and you find that you have a lot of junk sparks, like, again, many entrepreneurs do, and you know, people who are overly excited about a lot of things, you find that that's where you can get a lot of your time back. And it's this idea of understanding what is happening psychologically when it comes to why we want to do all these things. It's because we have FOMO. We have a fear of missing out. We see somebody else do something, our mirror neurons fire. We're like, I want that too. I want those feelings, right? But there was a concept that somebody came up with called JOMO, joy of missing out, which was attempting to counter this. But I don't believe in JOMO because that's just pretending. It's almost like a false saying to yourself, like, yeah, I'm going to be joyful that everybody's doing this thing that I really want to do, but I'm experiencing joy by missing out. That's fake to me. For me, the answer is this: the joy of opting out, understanding that those things exist, and yet saying, no, not right now. That is not for me because I have these other commitments that I've already said yes to that I'm going to focus on for a certain period of time. When you do that, you can actually utilize these other inspirations as reinforcements for the commitments that you've already made. And it's a really cool thing to see happen. I am teaching this to my kids. My son's 15 and he's going through that life now where he's exploring a lot of things and has said yes to a lot of commitments, but also wants to do other things. And to see his mind when he goes, oh, there's this other thing that's happening, but you know what? I have these other things that are important to me right now. I'm going to pass on that. It's like, oh my gosh, you are training yourself to understand priority. And that's a really hard thing for us to do. And if you were trained like me as a traditional school kid to focus on straight A's and perfection and all like a predetermined path for your life, it's very hard to get out of that and start to actually, let go of some of that and start to make decisions for yourself. So, I'm proud of my son, but also there's so many more people who need this information, need this help, need this understanding as a way to navigate the space and world that we live in today. So yeah, if you find that you're getting compelled to attempt or try to do other things, think about what that yes, if you were to say yes, think about what the no you'd be saying to simultaneously. Are you saying no to commitments you've already once said yes to? And then the change just happens. You'll find another thing that then will make this yes a no, and you'll say yes to something else. So again, that discipline that comes with this is really key.
I love the framework and the matrix that you just talk about because it really does help with figuring out what am I spending my time really doing and prioritizing the things that you want to be doing. One of the things you talk about is determining, kind of pursuing, certain learning that's, say, the right move. And one of the questions is like to ask, does this truly add value to my life? And we talk a lot about value with our people and like, what is that concept of value? And it's kind of personal for a lot of people. So I just wondered if you could expand on like, because that could be meaning money. It could be mean personal connections. It could be, health. It could be any number of things for people. I'm curious, how should people think about value and really adding that value to their life?
An exercise in the book is to determine what matters to you. And it's crazy how many people don't know what matters to them. They're just kind of living life autonomously and robotically. And how are you going to stand out in this, AI world when everything's robotic like that, right? So understanding what matters to you, what is your mission, what are things that are important to you, and then asking yourself, are the actions I'm taking in alignment with that? And if it's not, you can start to realign those things, or if it is, it can reinforce those things. And again, that's really key. It's almost like putting in an address in a navigation system. Like, you need to know where you're going, or else you're just going to eventually run out of gas and your parts are going to fall off. So it's important to know what's important to you. And again, there's no right answer. I think it's just a matter of self-reflection and understanding what is meaningful to you. And there's an exercise in the book I call a why-focused introspection, or a Wi-Fi for short, because if you don't have Wi-Fi, you're lagging. There's a lot of dad jokes in the book, especially if you listen to the audiobook. But it's so true. If you don't take the time every once in a while, and I say once a quarter, to spend 15 minutes, like literally block it out and put it as a recurring event in your calendar every quarter for 15 minutes, just to kind of zoom out for a second, go, okay, where am I at right now in life? And are the actions I've been taking in alignment with where I want to go? And doing that on a regular basis is important, because what got you here won't get you there. It's important because we change, our goals change, our environment and the people around us change, and so do our goals. But if you're just like, again, in automated sort of mode, you're going to potentially continue yourself further and further away from what actually is meaningful to you. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's important to know the why behind all of this, so that you can actually put yourself into these things and actually have them matter. Because when things matter, if they're important to you, even when they're hard, you go and do it anyway. Even when they're hard, you go and figure out a way around those things to support yourself and your family, or whatever it is that you're focusing on. So that is really key. And once you do that, then you can lean into not just from which direction you're going in your North Star, but you can lean into mastery. You can lean into going deeper into those things. Lean learning is about leaning out the things that don't matter, kind of like a diet, but then leaning into the things that do. And when you do that, you start to see rapid skill acquisition in whatever it is that you do. You know, a lot of people are like, Pat, how are you so good at all the things that you do? I have invented a product. I have successful YouTube channels. I'm really good at certain sports. And all, like, they're just like, you're just like this all around Renaissance person who's a genius. And I'm like, that is definitely not the case. But I found a mechanism and a way and a framework to learn my way into things and to understand things faster. And therefore, I can even get to the points of enjoyment much faster, which then leads me to want to do those things even more, which leads me to mastery even better. So again, these things stack on each other once you find that rhythm. And that's why this book was written. It was really fun to write, in fact, because these things have always been a part of me. I've just never been able to kind of extract them. And actually, one of the lessons in the book that I teach at the end is that you can learn so much by forcing yourself to teach these things. And by actually having the force function of the book being published forced me to lay these things out and put them in a manner that people can follow. And it's just, so I think this is why, especially for your audience, learning happens from action, because you are teaching. You're teaching these things in the products that you're creating and the information that you're packaging for people. And by forcing yourself to package those things, you are actually reinforcing and learning those things better for yourself too. There's a friend of mine who lives in Hawaii, and he's taking ukulele lessons from like literally professionals in Hawaii. I mean, that's the best place to take ukulele lessons if you want them. And in one of the first lessons, after he learned a few chords, his instructor, this professional, was like, okay, you have a son, right? And he's like, yeah, my son is like 8 years old. He's like, I want you to teach your son how to play the ukulele. And he's like, no, I'm learning from you. I can't teach this stuff yet. I like, maybe when I'm like further along. He's like, no, you now know 4 chords. Play those 4 chords, and let's see how you can get your son to play those 4 chords as well. And by having this, my friend being forced to teach his son, he was able to then reinforce it for himself, and he'll never forget those chords. I mean, they're second nature to him now at this point, because he was able to then, like, in a way, extrapolate what was going on and actually kind of then re-share those things with his son, and, you know, do it in a way that an 8-year-old can understand. Therefore, then learning those things internally much easier for himself to then move on to the next lesson. It's such a smart thing for the teacher to do. And so again, just there's so much with learning that we already kind of do, but we don't understand. And if we understand those things that can help us master faster, then we can get to those successful parts in life.
That's one of the things I loved about your book, actually, was in chapter 2. It wasn't like read the book and then take action, but like your chapter 2 is choose action over information. And so you can literally, in the second chapter, the whole chapter is just about like, how do you get started? How do you really start moving on this? Because I see this in our business when I'm talking to people who are considering joining a coaching program, and usually in enrollment conversations, people are often in this place where they're just seeking information. They're looking for information. They keep going and finding new places for information, but they've never even taken one action that really matters towards getting their business launched. And when people are in that place where they haven't actually taken the action, and maybe they're stuck on a tech thing, or they're stuck on some fear that they have, or a doubt if their idea is good, right? They don't even really know what the next thing is that they should be learning. And I loved how just by like getting a lead magnet up or taking action on something, you suddenly unearth what is the next thing I'm supposed to learn. So maybe you can talk a little bit about maybe overcoming that fear of taking those first actions, because I thought you handled that really well in the book.
Again, the action leads to learning. That is what is important here. You can overlearn yourself and overwhelm yourself by taking in too much information. So again, finding that first starting point is really key. What is the first domino? Similar to what Jay Papasan and Gary Keller talk about in the One Thing, right? What's the first thing that you can learn about that would then knock over all the other dominoes after that? So case in point, when I was learning how to speak on stage, right? There's so many things involved with speaking on stage, from what to put on your slides, to timing, to cadence, to where you are on stage. What do you do with your hands, voice, dynamic, like so many things. But one of the first dominoes that you could unlock that can help with all of those things is just learning the components of a good story. And then if you learn storytelling, that will help you across all those other kinds of things as well. The way I learned that in fact, was through a person I hired. Right? Sometimes the quickest way to learn something is to learn from somebody who's already done those things and who is teaching those things, who has already uncovered the path. And whether that's somebody who, yes, you could pay for that information and have them mentor you, which is probably the best way to do it. But if you can't afford that, then guess what? So many people can be virtual mentors. They teach these things in books and on their websites and on podcasts and on YouTube videos, and they teach these systems. The problem is when you absorb that and then you go, okay, I'm going to learn from the next person, and this algorithm is showing me now this person and this person and this person. Again, learning how to control that as it's coming into you is key. But finding the one resource to learn from, committing to a certain period of time to implement, and then assessing whether or not you should persist or pivot is the way to go. And so learning from a person, they can tell you, oh yeah, here's the first thing you need to do. Great. Then just learn about that. None of the other stuff matters until you need it. And that's really key. The other important part of this is the compartment of time, and giving yourself an amount of time to implement that thing and then to see whether or not it works or not. Recently, I started a new YouTube channel. It's a short specific channel in the Pokemon space, but I didn't link to it from anything I already had. I just wanted to see if I could learn TikTok. And so what I did was I created a daily video on TikTok of me opening a pack of cards. No face, no recognition of me or anything. And I just wanted to see if I can master that. And I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. In order to learn TikTok and learn the best practices here and get better at all this, I'm going to go for 60 days. And I'm just going to create a daily video for 60 days. And if I get to day 60, I'll win. That's my goal, because I can't control how many views I get. Yes, I want more views, but I can't control that always. I can't control the algorithm, but I can control when I hit record and when I hit publish. So day 60, if I get to 60 days in a row, I'll have won. So I start doing this thing. Day 30 comes around halfway through, and the views are not really there. 300 to 500 views per video. Generally speaking, if it were old me, I would have said, I guess I'm not cut out for this. I'm not good at it. But that wasn't the goal. Again, the goal was to get to day 60. The interesting thing, though, is that at day 30, I had been able to already cut my editing time. Like the production of these videos was cut from 45 minutes per video to 12 minutes per video. I got so much better at the thing that I was doing every day. Even though the views weren't there yet, the production levels were much, much better and faster. I learned all the shortcuts, all these things by just going daily and repeating the process. I started to learn the shortcuts and create templates and all these things. I also had 30 points of data, 30 videos that showed me which videos did better, where people dropped off, which ones were better than not, etc. Day 35 comes around, and one of those videos hits 750,000 views. And the entire channel since then just kind of has risen up. And today we are now 350 videos in, not even 1 year yet since starting this, what was going to initially be 60 days. I kept going with it, obviously. We are at 4 billion views across TikTok, Reels, and Shorts, and 1.8 million subscribers on YouTube, 1 million on Instagram. These are new channels, by the way, 1.6 million on TikTok. I've been invited by the Detroit Lions to open packs of Pokemon on their field because of this channel. I've met NBA and UFC fighters because of this channel. There's just like all these crazy opportunities that are happening now. And again, I didn't know anything about it, but I just went daily, and I failed those first 30 days, if you want to consider that a failure, but it's not, because I kept going, I kept learning, I kept getting faster and better. Now my editing is like, I can do a complete week's worth of videos, because I've still gone daily, in a 2-hour period, and done. I've done 2 hours of work for an entire week's worth of stuff. It's getting 10 million views a day, and another 5-figure ad revenue just on top of everything else that I've already been doing. So again, just another case for you learn as you go by taking action, not because, you read the whole book and then, maybe remember one thing to implement, but, you implement as you read the book, essentially.
Wow. That's an amazing story. And it sort of underlines, I think in the book you said count uploads, not likes. Count
uploads, not likes. Yes. Credit to another Pokemon YouTuber friend of mine, Alex Hodges, who was really the inspiration for me to just try the daily thing. And really, it's so key, because those uploads are what helps you eventually get to those views. And so when you count that, the thing that you can control, oftentimes the thing that you want comes in sort of, in a wave after that. And it happens. And that's what's really cool about the shorts and TikToks. It's like 60 seconds. You have the time to do that. You can just make the time to do that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, only having 45 minutes was a force function for me, because I could have over edited this whole thing and spent 3 hours on a video, but I didn't have the time. So by narrowing it down to 45 minutes and then later 30 and then 15, it has forced me to just make it the best I can be with the resources and time that I had. Again, not overlearning or overproducing. That's another problem that a lot of entrepreneurs have, especially those who like go full time with it. It's like, hey, Parkinson's law comes into play. You however much time you give it is however much time you're going to take. So why don't we shorten this time, put a force function on it, commit to a date that you're going to publish this thing that you're going to launch, and then go for it. And you'll find that you're able to make it happen, even though the date might not be, as far out as you might want.
So Pat, since we've been talking a little bit about Pokemon, can you just talk a little bit about, since we love to talk launches here. I love how you were able to look at when you came into your book launch, look at the assets you had. And one of the assets was this huge following, and how you took that following and leveraged it into, a major piece of your book launch.
Yeah. So I have this Pokemon audience. I've been building it for the last 4 years, 1.7 million subs on YouTube. We create these videos that are an hour or two in length, and they'll get 1 million views within a week. I go on these challenges to try to complete these Pokemon sets in a certain period of time all around the world. And it has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. Although I do inject a little bit of my entrepreneurial wisdom in there every once in a while. It's in general not in like a book launch for lean learning doesn't really make sense for a Pokemon audience. However, it made complete sense when I realized that I am very much somebody people follow on this channel because of me, not because of Pokemon, but because of my personal brand, because of the way I show up, because of how authentic I am on these channels. And so I was like, okay, how can I make it a win for my Pokemon audience to support my book? Because I could share it, and there's going to be a small number of people, but it's like the super fans who are like, Pat, I love everything you do, I'm going to buy it. And there were those people. But I wanted to inject something that could help maybe nudge a little bit more sales from the Pokemon people for my book. So here's what I did. Through a relationship, I found a person who was able to get me access to a certain number of Pokemon packs for a very good price. So I bought 2,000 of them. And I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. Anybody in my Pokemon audience who purchases a book, pre-orders it, submits their receipt and their address, I will send you a free pack of Pokemon cards. And I was able to work with a 3PL company out of Tennessee who was able to manage this for me and just get it done without a hitch. And I was able to basically sell out of those 2,000 booster packs of Pokemon within a week. And therefore, I had 2,000 additional sales that I wouldn't have had otherwise, that then led to, of course, the New York Times list and stuff. So, they had a lot to do with it. And what's been really cool is with the way that this works with Pokemon, every pack has some cards inside and you're not sure exactly what's inside. I've seen at least 100 pictures from people who get the bonus pack. I also included a little note inside, like a little business card size note with my logo on it. And it just is a handwritten note. It says it's a copied handwritten note, but it's like, thank you so much for supporting the book. If you wanted to share this, that'd be awesome. That kind of thing, in my signature. But I saw at least 100 photos, and it's only been a couple weeks, of people who have opened their pack of Pokemon and like got a good card inside and take a picture with it with my book and then share it on social media. So now there's like an additional tens of millions of people who now know this book exists, who, they're not all going to buy it, obviously. Some have, and in fact, but, it's just more awareness of the book through this audience that I've built that is in a space completely non-relevant to the book and its topic. And then I was recently in Tampa. One thing that I do for the Pokemon audience, and this is something that I teach in my other book, Superfans, which is people crave a sense of belonging and they want to find other people like them. So create those moments online and offline. So I created an event called Card Party. It launched in 2023. We just held our 3rd annual event in Tampa Bay, Florida. $0 spent on marketing. We sold out 5,500 people at the Tampa Bay Convention Center. 800 vendor tables, all sold out. $0 spent on marketing, all word of mouth. And there were at least 200 to 300 people who were the ones that pre-ordered my book, who were, again, at this event. So they're spending money with me in all different kinds of ways up the ascension ladder, and who wanted me to sign their book in person with them at the event, which was really cool. And then our next event is in Seattle. It's already almost sold out in October this year. So twice a year now, because it's just been so popular. So Again, I practice what I preach, and I do it not just in the entrepreneurial space, but even in the Pokemon space, which 5 years ago I knew nothing about. I got into it because my kids got into it, and I just fell in love with the community and have done what I could to show up and serve just like I do everywhere else I go.
I wanted to ask you guys, because it kind of leads into this, is the idea of the power of community, or what you call the power of champions, right? Not doing this alone and being willing to ask for help, or put yourself in a place where you can get help. I experience this all the time, where I think people, especially at least when you're talking to people about enrollment into coaching programs where they can get help, a lot of times people, I find, are kind of married to their struggle. Like they really want to keep struggling, or they want to keep, this should be hard. So can you talk a little bit about the role of community or champions in people's success here?
Yeah, champions or a support system is really, really key. You cannot do this alone, Jeff. I know you'll support that as well, because we all have really good people who we surround ourselves with who've helped us get here. Jim Rohn, I think, was the one who said you're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. And if you're just trying to do things on your own, you can't get better. There's literally no way to do it. This reminds me of a story. My wife is involved in this story. When I was first starting out my architecture website in 2008, I really wanted to do it all myself. There was some sense of pride that comes along with just the struggle and then the triumph of figuring those things out. So I was learning JavaScript, learning CSS. Like looking back, I'm like, I had no business doing that because I was not good at it. And it just was a struggle. And I remember I had built my website. It was on WordPress, but I was trying to figure out how to get an image from the left side of the page to the right side of the page. And it took me 8 hours to figure it out, and I couldn't do it. And my wife was seeing me struggle. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm just having a hard time doing this." She's like, "What are you trying to do?" And I showed her, and she handed her phone to me with somebody on the other line. It was her friend Mel from college, who is in web design. And he basically solved the problem for me in 3 minutes. I was just like, yeah, okay, got it. Boom, done. And that was it. And if only I had asked for help earlier, I could have gone further and actually done things that mattered more, versus trying to waste my time trying to figure this out because of what? Pride? Who cares? I need to get this thing done and serve people. So I could have done it much faster. Again, a lot of this is psychological, just us getting in our own way. But the emotional and sort of direct support I had from my wife April at the time was really key. But she's not the only player in this. There's the emotional support that can come from friends and family, which is key. They might not know the same language you're speaking when it comes to what you're trying to do, but having that support system emotionally is key. The colleagues and peers that you have is sort of the second level of champions in your life. These people who are in it with you. They are going through the same motions. They have gone through these motions with you. They are in the thick of it. They are in the trenches with you. They can hold you accountable. You can group up and partner with them and help fight these and slay these dragons together with you, which is pretty cool. And that's really important as well. Peers and colleagues, like mastermind groups and things like that, are just vital. Helping others as they help you, and having this sort of Knights of the Round Table component versus somebody at the head of the table. That's why the table is round. I think that's key. And then you have your virtual mentors and your personal mentors, the people who will kind of take you under their wing and kind of give you specific direct advice for you and your situation and look after you, whether you pay for that or you get some really kind person to help you. That can be the ultimate level. I remember when I was learning how to race in a triathlon, I knew nothing about it, and he helped guide me. His name is also Jeff, and I'm still working with him 10 years later, and he helped me out for free. But now we've kind of mutually helped each other in all different kinds of ways. Myself with his business, and he with my fitness. There are so many great people out there who are willing to help. You just have to be open to it and realize that it's better together. And the other part about this that I found, especially with entrepreneurs who struggle with this a little bit, is a lot of it comes down to this world of abundance that we are in, and not thinking that the world is abundant. A lot of people think we live in something that's more like a poker table, where, Jeff, if you're winning, that means I'm losing. Or if I'm winning, that means you're losing. And if you think about the world in that way, that's just going to suck. And you're not going to be able to make good friends in that way. We live in this amazing world where we can all get more chips. And if we actually work together, more chips are going to come out of nowhere, and we're able to share and help each other out. And that's how it should be. And so find your people. And that's why communities like the ones that you guys have. We have a community at SPI, the Pokemon community. We are surrounded by people who get it, who understand the language, who understand the struggles, but also can be there to support one another. And you also are together rooting for something, right? And that brings a sense of humanness to this world that I think is really important. That's why we're seeing a lot of live events now, not just in the Pokemon space, but in general, being a very key strategy for a lot of entrepreneurs because people are craving that in-person sort of human experience again versus like the very artificial things that we're seeing online where you don't even know what's real anymore.
Can we double click on the force function around teaching something to be able to make distinctions and like with your book? Like this all came naturally to me. I'm paraphrasing you, but this is stuff I've been doing for a long time. And then you sat down to write a book as a force function to being able to make those distinctions. And this is something I've got a couple areas in my life that I'm just really good at, but I'm unconsciously good at it. And I'd like to teach it, but I'm intimidated by teaching it. In fact, you mentioned Yannick Silver earlier, and Yannick's one of my oldest and dearest friends in the industry. He was just out at our mastermind as my guest here in Durango, and he uncovered one of them. And he just started pushing me. You got to teach this. You got to teach it. You got to teach it. And I'm like, I'm scared too. I don't know.
May I ask what is it, or are you willing to share?
It's about how to be successful without messing up your health and your relationships. Basically, it's about how to have a great life, all around life, while being a kick-ass entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love it. I'm not going to dive in deep with you on that because I'm sure Yannick has already given you some of that. But
yeah, he had me squirming. It was, yeah.
But like, imagine that you were able to put something together, whether it's a book or a course or a program or a one-day workshop or something. It would force you to compartmentalize a lot of this stuff, to understand the relationship between certain things, to even discover while you were looking to teach this interactions and these like nuances of it that you didn't even know were there, so that you can even reinforce them for yourself, for your family, for the others around you, for your students, etc. Like, this is what lean learning has done for me. These are ways that I've always like approached things, but by defining these things, by defining the inspiration matrix, by understanding that there's different levels of champions in my life and realizing that, maybe one is more plentiful than the others and I need a balance. The idea of micro mastery and how I approach things and by breaking them down into little things and micro focusing on just one component of it for a certain period of time. Now that I know that that's how I do it, I can now plan for that. I can now build for that. I'm now getting even faster at the way I acquire certain skills because I now understand more about myself in that process. And I think that maybe in addition to already living a healthy, fulfilled life, what if you were able to unlock even more health and more fulfillment through the understanding of what is working for you and leaning into those things?
That it's an interesting question. I will tell you that my palms are literally sweating right now that I actually said that out in public.
That's cool.
I mean, which is maybe a signal that I really do need to do this, but literally my palms are sweating.
I think that you might even hear some messages from people who hear this podcast who would probably only want to learn that from you. Here's a question that I ask in the book to help with a lot of this stuff if you're making decisions about anything and anything you want to do or attempt to do. And that's this question I got from Tim Ferriss, which is, if this were easy, what would it look like? Maybe you teaching this simply is just a podcast episode where, Dan and Chris interview you just about this topic, and that's it. Maybe that's your way of putting it out there in the world without having to sit down for hours and try to, you're just kind of stream of consciousness talking about it, which in and of itself can help you unpack these things. Just like how when you're in therapy and you're talking about certain things, you start to go, oh yeah, I never made that connection before, but now that I say it out loud, I see it and now I can deal with it. Those kinds of things happen. And so it doesn't have to be hard. It could be pretty simple, or maybe it's just a journal entry that you have for yourself. And that's it. That can help you extrapolate some of this stuff too.
It's interesting. We've in this conversation, and I don't want to turn this into therapy for Jeff, but I was out to dinner. Yannick came out. We were in Durango. We came out a day early. We went for a hike. We went out to a really nice dinner. And he said, "What creative thing are you not doing because it scares you?" And I said, "Well, it'd be like a book on this." And he just dug into me. He wouldn't let it go. And I'm like, "Well, no, a book is like 2 years of my life. So maybe I could do this as an online, just like a workshop." And so I did start going down that route of how do we make it easy, but you just took it another level. Yeah.
And this is the power of just talking things through, even just like us talking about this for the last 3 minutes. You're starting to uncover maybe new pathways that this could lead to that weren't there before, versus what, again, most people do is we have these thoughts and we just keep them in. And we only know what we know. We only see what we see. You can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. So you need these people on the outside of that bottle to kind of like point these things out. And this is why masterminds are great. This is why friendships like what you have with Yannick and I have with a few other people on my end here, where we talk deeply about these things. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for these other people. So champions are important. These people who, when you succeed, they will be genuinely happy for you. That is a champion. And for many that could be rare. But like with my buddy Alex, who had that quote, count uploads, not likes, like he and I, you could look at the surface and go, oh, you guys are competitors. You guys are competing for attention in the Pokemon space. We share everything with each other. When I share that, like, oh my gosh, this video just hit 10 million views, I know that it's not going to come with, oh man, like I wish that was me. No, he's super stoked about it. And I'm stoked on him when he reaches a new sponsorship deal with somebody or something like that. Like that's so cool. And finding those people in your life is really, really important because they're going to root for you and they want you to win and they're going to help you just like you can help them.
I learned something about you in this book that I didn't know before, and it was that you were a rower in college. You were on a rowing team. I was a rower actually in high school, and I remember learning a tremendous amount at that formative age about success by rowing. And I just wondered if you had any insights from that time period that's really affected you. What did you learn from rowing that affected you now in business?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Rowing was one of the hardest things I've ever gotten involved with, but also one of the most fulfilling. I mean, there's a lesson in that itself, that a lot of things in life that are hard also can become the most fulfilling. I was obviously, if you are looking at this video right now, I'm a very small person, relatively speaking. I was on the lightweight crew, not the heavyweight crew, which is like the Olympic level crew. And I was at Cal. So Cal is a very competitive rowing establishment. They compete with, you know, Washington and all the Ivy League schools. I mean, they're in the regattas together. So to just be in that environment was really amazing. And literally our heavyweight team was full of Olympians. I mean, they literally looked like Vikings. It was crazy. But one thing I learned that I talk about in the book is this thing called a power 10. Because when you're in a race, you know, you're rowing and there's that person who's a little bit smaller at the top of the boat called a coxswain, who's sort of like guiding the rowers on when to stroke and all those kinds of things. There's this thing called a power 10 because you think about it, it's like, oh, everybody's just rowing as hard as they can. But that's not true. There's some level of strategy that comes with rowing and winning a race, because when you're right up against another boat and you're kind of, you know, right neck and neck, you can implement something called the power 10 to get ahead of them. And that is, you're already rowing at a very fast pace and putting a lot of energy into it. But for 10 strokes and 10 strokes alone, at the command of the coxswain, you will then stroke together 10 powerful additional effort related strokes to see your boat surge way further ahead on the boat next to you that's not doing that. Now, of course, then they're going to implement a power 10, and you know, there's this, like, again, cat and mouse strategy that's happening. And of course, if you did like a power 100, you would die, because you can't put 100 all effort strokes in, because you would just exhaust yourself. So this is a symbol for how we can get better and move faster in our skill acquisition, in our life, in our career, whatever it is. Yes, we're coasting, we're kind of, you know, merrily riding along, but every once in a while, you need to implement a power 10, where for a period of time, maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's for 2 weeks, or maybe it's a month, you're putting additional effort into something. You're putting a little bit more added pressure for a period of time, knowing that there's an end. That's why a power 10 was possible, because it was just 10 strokes. You could always add 10 more strokes of really hard pulling. And if you never did that, you'd lose. But if you always did that the whole time, you'd also lose. So it's just a matter of every once in a while putting a power 10 in. So for a podcaster, for example, a power 10 might mean maybe you go weekly every week, and that's great. But for 1 week in September, you say, you know what, we're going to have marketing week. It's going to be this week in September. And for every day in this week, we're going to have a podcast episode with a marketer who's going to tell us a new strategy. And we're going to make a big deal about this. We're going to make an event about it, right? It's a higher level of effort in a contained period of time that's going to help you do a lot of things, especially in that case. Okay, you'll get more downloads, you'll get more subscribes, you'll get more people talking about it, you'll climb higher in the rankings, all these things, right? 10 recently for me with the book was the final editing process, where I just kind of basically locked myself in a room for 10 days and cranked it all out before the deadline. And I spoke with my family. I was like, hey, family, I'm going to be locked in my office. I need to finish this book. It needs to be almost kind of rewritten in a way, and I need to get it out. So this is my power 10 for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be locked in here. Just feed me. And then I promise we're going to do some fun stuff on the other side of it. And we did. And I got the book done, and it was the best writing I've ever done. And this book came out, and it became a New York Times bestseller. So that is what I learned from. I mean, there's so many other things too. I mean, one of the interesting stories, I do talk about this in the audiobook. So if you do have the audiobook, you'll know the story, but I don't talk about it in the physical book. I eventually got injured during my rowing career. I was playing a lot of intramural soccer, and I did a bicycle kick, and I landed on my back, and I punctured a blood vessel in my lung and started just coughing up blood. So of course I was never going to row that year anymore because my lungs were messed up. And my coach was really upset because I was on a boat with 7 other men, and then like we couldn't race the next week. They had to find a replacement. And so I felt really bad. So I was like in the boathouse every single day, just kind of cleaning the boats and kind of doing grunt work. And then all of a sudden, the women's rowing team, the women's lightweight rowing team, they lost their coxswain. She quit. There was some drama. I don't know what happened, but they were coxswainless. I was sitting there doing nothing. And they're like, well, Pat, why don't you just, so that the girls can keep practicing, why don't you just like command the boat for a bit? And I knew all the commands. I knew how that worked. And I was like, okay, but this is weird. Like, I'm a guy on a girls team, but also more weird is I'm the heaviest person on the boat. You're supposed to be the lightest person on the boat if you're the coxswain, not the heaviest because of the way the boat tilts. Anyway, we got the practice in, started to find a rhythm together, and they ended up not replacing me. They kept me as the coxswain for the rest of the season. And every race that we raced, we won. And I don't know what it was about the way I ran that boat, but those girls were pulling hard for me, and they were amazing. And every time we won, we were on the podium at, like, I remember we were at, where were we? Humboldt or something like that. And we were all standing on the podium. I'm like this dude in the podium standing there. And like, we got these medals, and then the girls would have to, like, I guess it's tradition, you throw the coxswain in the water, and it took all 8 girls to like throw me in the water. And then fast forward to next season, I ended up dating one of them. Not smart. Things got weird. And then I had to quit. Like, they basically wanted me off the team because it was a problem. So there's some lessons in there too, but we don't have to get into that. But that's, again, like making lemonade out of lemons. Like, here's these 2 things that don't seemingly work together, and they ended up working better than anybody could ever thought. So if you ever go to the boathouse in Alameda, at the Bay Area in San Francisco, the Cal Boathouse, there is a plaque that says Women's Rowing Team Coxswain of the Year. My name is on there from 2002.
Wow, that's very cool. I always love to hear positive rowing stories and how it impacts people because, sports in general does, but I feel like rowing has that little extra special like pain factor of just, it teaches you a lot about yourself going through that process.
I wanted to quit almost every time, especially on so there's a rowing machine called an erg. It sucks. Oh my gosh. Like, we'd throw up after our tests and stuff, and it's like every stroke you're like, I want to quit, but you don't, and you just keep going, and you feel so proud of yourself at the end. Not only that, you're in like tip-top shape. That's where I learned to finally get in shape and eat well. So like it affected my health, and just the camaraderie with the friends that you make on your boat, and how you kind of like work together in a almost like telepathic kind of way with how you're rowing. It's just such a beautiful sport. I do miss it.
I was listening to the Olympics one time, and they did this special where they cut away when they're doing the Olympic trials and stuff, right? And they're like, just so you know, the Olympic level rowing is one of the most painful sports you can possibly do because you're putting so much strain on your body that the blood starts shunting away from your extremities, and they have to fight through that pain mentally to keep going. And so, yeah, just the sport itself, it requires so much physically, but also mentally to really succeed. Much like a lot of things in life, we really got to have that mental game going.
There's another thing I remember. We were racing a race once, and I was the 8th seat in the back because I was the smallest person, and I caught a crab. And when you catch a crab rowing, it's the worst thing. What that means is your oar kind of gets stuck because you weren't keeping up with everybody else, and it basically, they call it catching a crab because it's almost like a crab is like literally holding your oar down, and the boat's still going forward, so you can't get it out, and you're basically just slowing everybody down. And like, I felt so terrible because we basically lost the race because I caught a crab. But the team was just like, hey, just do better next time. And that's it. Like they didn't get like just the support I got, even though I made a mistake, was so important for me to get better and actually have one of the most improved scores of the entire team all season was really key. So again, to go back to champions, having those people on your team or around you who will support you even when you're sucking is great. I mean, it's so necessary.
You mentioned something you learned from Simon Sinek in the book, the 3-second rule. And I remember that being very cool, but I thought, could you explain the 3-second rule for us?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily learn this from Simon Sinek, but it was an experience with Simon that taught me this lesson. And it's a very important one. So, and I teach this to a lot of people because I throw events, and a lot of people who go to events are very introverted. They don't want to like step out of their shell. And I've been to a lot of events as an introvert as well, and I like don't have a great experience because I didn't chat with anybody. But I can't expect people to just come up to me. I have to take initiative, and that's really important. So the 3-second rule is something I learned after I had spoken at a Dave Ramsey event in San Diego. I was in the green room, which is kind of where all the speakers hang out. And I was in there by myself. Everybody was kind of watching the other presentations. I was set to speak in a few moments. And then all of a sudden, Simon Sinek walks in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love this guy. Like start with why. He was very, influential in my start and like a lot of the things I learned in business. And I wanted to talk to him. But the longer I waited, the more I psyched myself out of doing that. The more excuses I made. Oh, I'm just a nobody to him. Like, what if I say something wrong? Who am I to kind of speak to this like person? And so, 20 minutes went by. He was literally sitting there by himself, and I was sitting there by myself on the other side of the room, like, eating snacks. And then he left, and I lost my opportunity. It was gone forever. I mean, maybe I'll see him again, in which case I'll make sure to implement this 3-second rule, which is if it's not disrespectful in that moment, don't wait more than 3 seconds to go up to somebody and say hello. It's oftentimes the wait to do that is what you fear the most. It's not actually even the act of doing it. It's almost like skydiving. I heard when you skydive, like the scariest parts are all the parts leading up to when you are actually in the most danger, which is when you're free falling, which is the most fun. That's when you've experienced the most joy. So the 3-second rule, I teach this to a lot of people. I teach it to my kids. Like, hey, if there's somebody there and they're not in the middle of a conversation and you have a moment, don't take more than 3 seconds to go up and say hello, because once you get started, everything just starts happening anyway. Do you guys have issues with that, or were you always kind of extroverted and able to easily talk to people?
Well, Dan and I are definitely not extroverts. Chris has definitely got.
I've trained myself to be I'm an introvert who's very trained in being extroverted because of my sales training stuff that I used to sell Cutco. So it was like, you can't be successful as a salesperson if you don't force yourself to go talk to people or get yourself out there. I always like that our events, we acknowledged that a lot of our community is introverted. And at the beginning of the events, I remember us giving guidance on how to be, I think what was your position as abundant, or like an abundant personality or something like that, so that people felt more comfortable interacting and creating that community while we were at a live event. That just little bit of guidance used to bring so much, I think, for people to feel more comfortable at an event, because a lot of people are online introverts, right?
There's a reason you're sitting there thinking you can build a business, just type, sit in front of a computer.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big draw for online businesses. I can be in the comfort of my own home. I can hide behind my keyboard. But honestly, you have to take some initiative today to build these real relationships, because I found that the relationships are where it's at. It's who you know and who they know. So, it takes practice. It can take a lot of letting go. It could take a lot of support for it to happen. But this is why I like platforms like YouTube, where you can go live and you can be messy and it's fine, or Instagram Live even, or TikTok Live, and just kind of practice showing up and talking to people before you have to go out into the real world and do it. But honestly, doing it in the real world can sometimes be easier because you're around people who and who have bought a ticket to that same event, and you understand what they're into and what they're interested in.
The other training we would give, like at the beginning of our workshops, would always be how to be a champion. So because that's how do you attract champions as you be a champion. So I love that you're covering that in the book. because that concept is so powerful. It is so amazing to have champions.
And it's the starting that people struggle with so often too. Like you said, once you start the conversation, it usually starts to flow. But it's similar in business, right? In my sales training, we used to say you only need 2 seconds of courage. And you just need to be brave for a couple of seconds to pick up the phone and call, or go talk to the person, or ask for the order, or ask for the leads. You only need a couple seconds of courage, and mentally that would kind of at least get people started. And once you do it a few times, that confidence is earned because you've done it a number of times. Then it becomes much, much easier. But it's so important. I think it's more and more important nowadays than ever, because it's fewer people that have that training or that inkling.
Right. I mean, inside of our community at SPI, we make those introductions for people. We have mastermind matching that happens because we know how important it is and how oftentimes people are going to avoid potentially feeling uncomfortable in that. So we're like, nope, can't avoid it. We're going to do it for you. And oftentimes it works really, really well.
Love that. Hey, Chris, what do you think? Is it taco time here?
I think it's taco time. Let's do
tacos.
Yeah, we've got our 2-minute taco break here. And so we're going to start off with just some basic questions we ask every guest and see how you answer those. And then we'll get into some personalized taco related questions just for Pat Flynn. So first one is hard shell or soft shell tacos?
Soft shell.
My man.
Right.
Let's go.
That's a solid answer. Very popular answer. All right. Spicy, medium, or mild for your tacos?
So I like to go medium. I like a little spice in there, but nothing too spicy that then I'll have to chug tons of water to kind of get through it. But I do like a little spice in there for sure.
Do you like to kind of push the envelope a little bit, like the upper limit of what's happening?
Yes, actually, I do. It's scary though, because there's the places I go. I live in San Diego. I'm literally less than an hour from the border, and there's a ton of taco places here that each have their own specialty sauces and stuff. And I forget which ones are like, oh, okay, Jalapenos has a super hot habanero, but then this other place, Roberto's, has like a really mild one. Like I forget who has what. So I have to be careful and do a little taste test first, but some of them are like way too hot for me. Yeah. But yeah, I like to push it a little bit. Sometimes I'll put like the mild and then maybe 1 or 2 drops of the hot just to kind of feel a little tingle in there. But yeah, I'm a big taco aficionado, so we're speaking my language now.
Yeah, it's good to know where people are talking about when they say spicy, because San Diego spicy is a little different than Vancouver spicy, where I'm from.
Oh. Do they have spicy over there?
Yeah, it's just the Canadian winter stops us from having too much spice. But next one is, what about guacamole? Are you adding the guacamole every time or no?
Huge guac fan, big fan of avocado. I know it's healthy as well. It just adds a little creaminess to the taco and the bite for sure. Most of the tacos I enjoy though are very small. They're like the street tacos. Mm-hmm. Like literally just carne asada with some raw white onion, cilantro, and just like a splotch of guac, and then some hot sauce, and that's it. It's just try to keep it simple. However, there is a place in San Diego, if you guys ever come down, or for anybody listening to this, there is a fancy taco place called Puesto, which has some of the best tasting tacos. I mean, they're a little expensive for like what tacos should be, but they do this thing where they put cheese on the grill. Like they literally put cheese on a grill till it gets crispy, and that's the first layer in the soft taco. So you have like a crispy cheese shell that then surrounds the inside. It's really good.
Wow, sounds delicious. So let's get to some spicier questions here. Well, I also learned from this book that your favorite movie is Back to the Future. And so yes. I crafted a taco question here. Doc Brown shows up in the DeLorean and some of the best street tacos in the universe. And he invites you to join him to go anywhere in history and have tacos with anybody. Where are you going and who are you meeting?
It's like a Rick and Morty situation going on here.
Exactly. Rick and Morty was kind of based on Back to the Future, right?
It was. Rick and Morty. I would want to go to some like remote village deep in Mexico where you have the abuelita who just makes those tortillas like fresh with a family, like almost like if you know the Pixar movie Coco. Like I want to go to a place that looks like that, just like some family's home. It doesn't need to be like anybody famous or anything. I just want like home cooked corn tortillas with carne asada and like whatever the family style salsa is. Like that would be amazing. And I know a little Spanish, so I'd be able to kind of hang a little bit with kind of speaking, and then, you know, just the Mexico culture is similar to Filipino culture. I'm half Filipino, and it's like very family centric. It's very like, you know, party food, everybody just enjoying themselves. That and like a Corona, I think I'd be so happy.
Well, which Pokemon would be the worst to have tacos with?
Probably Lechonk, which is a pig, because especially if you're having like carnitas, it would look at you and be like, yo, I think I knew that person. I think I knew that. Like, that's my brother. Don't do that. So I would feel very self-conscious around like a Lechonk. Now there are some good ones that can like help you heat up your taco, like a Charizard or a Charmander. Even you can just kind of like keep it warm.
Last one here is, you know, in your book you talk about, you know, what is the sliver of information that you need in order to get started. And I'm curious, if I were going to start a taco related podcast, what do you think that sliver of information is I need to get started?
Number one, the title would be Let's Taco About It. That for sure would be, that's probably already in existence, to be
Somebody
honest.
must have that, right?
The first sliver of thing that you would need would be, what do people want to know about tacos? That's it. Then you can just kind of start to base your information and what it is you want to share from there. Now, that being said, there are a lot of great podcasts that involve certain food items and drink items, from beer to coffee and those things, where it's not necessarily about the food item or the beverage, but that just becomes a theme within it, just like how tacos we're talking about right now. Starting with something that matters to you in terms of a topic could be really important, and then you can kind of inject the taco into it and have a segment in your show like what we're doing right now, because obviously tacos are very important to you guys too. So yeah, I think and finally, you know, in the world of podcasting, realizing that you just need to hit record and have a conversation with somebody that you already know, and then kind of start from there. Then you can start getting the outside guests on, or the A-listers who want to come on and talk later. Everybody knows somebody who they can interview for a podcast already. And you could start there, just so it's easy, right? If this were easy, what would it look like? You would just talk to somebody you already know, and, you know, maybe you're talking about tacos together. In fact, you could even, like, if I really wanted to do this, or if I really wanted a taco-based podcast, I would find a local food truck that is a taco-based food truck and try to film it out of there, or have the taco shop in the background. So you now have this artifact that's visual, that could be seen, that become like, and then when people see it on the street, they're like, hey, that's the food truck that Pat records that podcast out of. Like, I'm going to order that dish that he always orders, right? I would just order the same thing every single time, just so that the audience knows. And we start to build almost like a brand culture around the podcast, where these things become characters, and these people who show up become cast members, if you will. And this is what helps you build your little universe. This is what I do in the podcasting space. I have a little universe that I've created around the challenges that I do. Certain store owners in San Diego who show up, and certain, you know, even like non-human characters. Like, I have a timer that has googly eyes on it. It's a kitchen timer I bought on Amazon, and I put googly eyes on it and just named it Steve, because Steve is like a very like harsh sounding name. It's like, oh, Steve. We're making Steve merch. People want Steve merch. It's literally a kitchen clock with googly eyes, and I have plushy Steves being manufactured right now, and Steve, like a Steve line of fashion items. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it sounds so stupid, but it's world building. That's what we're doing. And I think a podcaster could build a world where tacos are a part of that world, but then also the person who works at that food truck and the food truck itself, and then you're selling all of a sudden mini versions, like Hot Wheel versions of that food truck, to your audience to help them feel more connected with the brand, right? That stuff is so fun, and that's what's going to help you stand out over other people. It's the culture that you're building in this world that you're building, not just the information you're sharing.
Pat, this has been so awesome, just chatting with you and learning so much about your book. And if people want to get the book, where can they go and do that?
Thank you. Thank you, each of you, for allowing me to just share a little bit and kind of have a fun, casual conversation about all these kinds of things. Usually the interviews that I do about the book are a lot more like question after question, serious, no tacos, so I don't enjoy it as much. But this has been really fun. Lean learning, How to Achieve More by Learning Less, you could find on Amazon, of course, and anywhere books are sold, even at Barnes & Noble, which is pretty cool. I still get people in the Pokemon community say, Pat, I found your book at Barnes & Noble. It's really cool. And then, of course, we have our sort of landing page at leanlearningbook.com if you want to see what else is perhaps available there. But Amazon's always the best way to support. And the audiobook's available. I read it myself. I go off script a bit. And just I hope this message gets seen by more people, because I think it's a message that's more important than ever right now in the world that we live in and where things are going. So I appreciate you for giving me the platform to share a little bit and just have a fun conversation.
We like to finish off our interviews with a final question, because we're called Dare to Launch, and lots of people who are listening to this are aspiring to do their next big launch. So I wanted to ask you that question. Why should people dare to launch?
You know, dare is an interesting word. I remember it from my elementary and middle school days, right? The dare people would come in, right? Drug abuse resistance education. But what we're doing here is doubt resistance education, doubt abuse resistance education. And I feel like the doubt starts to go away once you start to take a little bit of action. And if you could find that first step, the step might be different for different people. So connect with the community here, or read Jeff's book, or just find out what the first steps are they teach you, and just give yourself a moment and time on your calendar to start to implement that. And when you do that, you're already going to be ahead of most people who are going to talk themselves out of this or overlearn their way into finally taking action. And the doubts start to go away when you start to see some small wins. If you can celebrate those small wins and not worry too much about getting to the end goal, but also enjoying the process of what you're learning and what you're discovering and unlocking new things. Your first sale, for example, before you become a 7-figure entrepreneur, get to that first sale, unlocks that confidence that you can then move forward to your business with. So many things can happen when you start to narrow things down and focus on just the next step only. And just trust the process and understand that the next resources you'll need will be there when you need them. You have access to them already, but put them aside for now, for the first thing that you need to do, and then you can go from there.
Thanks so much, Pat. And thank you, Launch family, for listening. And we hope this conversation inspires you to dare to launch. Wow, you've just been listening to us for almost an hour. I bet you have a business idea that you want to get launched. Well, if you'd like to get some free resources and free training, go over to getyouLaunched.com and check out what we've got over there. All it needs is an email, and we'll send you out some free stuff. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.